Hello, personal productivity enthusiasts and community. Welcome to Anything But Idle, the Productivity News Podcast. I'm Ray Sidney Smith,
And I'm Augusto Pinat.
and we're your hosts for Anything But Idle. This is episode 87. I've got that right this time. The Google Pixel Fall launch event, our commentary episode on that. Of course, each week we review and discuss the productivity and technology news headlines of the week. But when these major events happen, and we've had 3 of them happen this week, we bring you these special commentary episodes to discuss with you, what basically happened at those events. And today, of course, we've brought onto the show again Art Gelwix to talk about what happened at the Google Pixel Fall event. Art Gelwix is a productivity and collaboration consultant. He's a blogger at theideapump.com, and he's the host of the Being Productive podcast. He joins Augusto Pinau as a co-host of Cross Platform, and then, of course, he joins us weekly on Productivity Cast. And so welcome to Anything But Idle, Art.
Hey, guys.
How's it
Long
going?
time no see.
Long time no see.
We're spending a good amount of time together.
They got to spread out these announcements better. They're killing us with this. I mean, there's
I
so
know.
much stuff in one. I was not ready for this. All of this stuff that hit at one time. Not that I'm complaining. I love having all kinds of cool toys to look at, but good grief.
So this was the Pixel Fall event on October 19th. And of course, at this event, the keynote and the product announcements really were for the long-awaited but mostly known about made by Google smartphones, the Pixel 6 and the 6 Pro. And so what did you think about the event kind of, generally? And what did you feel like, was good about the event, bad about the event? And then we could talk about some of the particulars regarding the Pixel 6, the 6 Pro, and of course the announcement of Pixel Pass, which is Google's first subscription service for the Pixel phones specifically.
Yeah, the event itself, I thought was, if you look at it in the context of all the events that happened, I'd say it was one of the better ones that's happened recently. They did a very good job of laying out exactly what they wanted to cover and how they wanted to cover it. They didn't lose sight of their messaging during the presentation itself. They made it very inviting. Why they felt the need to actually do it in the Google store was, I don't know. That kind of eluded me a little bit. But you could tell from the beginning that they were all in on the main parts of these new phones, the tensor chip and the camera updates. This is their thing. This is their push. This is what's going to make them different. Plus the fact that they really seem to want to go out of their way to call out the fact that this is not your Pixel 5. This is not your Pixel 4. This is not what your old expectations of your phones were. There was actually a point during the presentation, one of the presenters kind of said, yeah, the Pixel 5, for lack of a better term, underperformed. It was still really good, but it underperformed. And this device is so much better, 370% better in some factor than the Pixel 5s were. So already they were setting the groundwork to say, hey, what you knew about Pixel phones is not the case anymore. This is literally a full leap forward. You can see that from the design aesthetic. You can see that from the way they're approaching it. And honestly, the way they have these priced, they want to be a serious player in this, which is new for Google, I think. I don't think Google has ever taken themselves seriously in this arena. And I think this is the first time that they're stepping up to say, you know what? We are a viable alternative to Apple and Samsung.
Yeah, I think the breakout star of the show was the pricing, right? They're starting out
pricing.
at Pixel 6s are starting at the $599 price tag.
That's
and
crazy.
Yeah, and then the Pixel 6 Pro is coming out at $899. So both very competitively priced at their baseline.
And just think about that for a second. You've got a device, a Pixel device, that it's a pure Android experience with 5 years, I believe it's 5 years of security updates for $599. That's like Motorola level pricing. Plus, truly what I would say is the best camera in the business. Not only from improved hardware now, which they finally stepped up and put a decent camera in it. But the software continues to be top notch. I would literally have no hesitation recommending this phone to anybody who's looking for an Android phone. I would say that this should be a serious consideration for anyone who's looking
So
for a
on,
device.
on the conspiracy theorist, this was really a jab to who? To Microsoft, to Samsung? Because I agree, the Pixel has always been, from my perspective, the toy that Google have. Okay, and they're powerful, they're all that, but Google has never seemed to make a real push. They did the tablets, but yeah, they do it like, okay, we can make a cool hardware, but we don't care. This time, the impression was different for me. It was like, okay, well, after 5 versions, we decided that we're going to start doing this seriously, and we're really going to bring it. And then they bring it into a really competitive prices with a completely powerful device. So, who they're taking a jab to?
So, okay.
Because it's not the iPhone.
Well, no, but I'm going to build on it because I think who they're taking a jab at is themselves. And here's where my conspiracy brain is going to go with this. If you're going to put so much weight behind this new Google Silicon, this Tensor chip that is supposed to be the most wonderful thing they've ever created, the last thing you want to do is put that in a crappy phone. You need to put that in a top-notch device because anything negative about that device takes away from all that effort that you've put into this Tensor chip. So they literally, I would have loved to have been in that staff meeting or that design meeting where they're all sitting around going, yeah, we actually got to build a phone around this now. And if you're a football fan, that's kind of the way I'm looking at this from Google's mindset. The Tensor chip is their quarterback. They went out and they drafted and raised and through their academy system a top-notch striker. This is their guy. He's the one that's going to carry the franchise. But now you have to build the team around that guy. And that's what I think Google is finally doing with these two phones, is they're saying, we now have silicon that we can control. We can write our software to take maximum advantage of that silicon. But if we don't have the supporting hardware around it, it's not worth the effort. It's going to cause problems to them. And you can see that with the increase in the battery size. You can see that in the increase with the camera sensors. You can see that in the increase with the memory. All of the things that they've gone through and optimized around, the design considerations. That giant freaking camera bar on the back. Not to go through and say, oh, we need to make it little. We need to make it little. No, we want the best camera experience possible. So therefore, we're going to put a big bar on the back. And we're going to put all the sensors there. And you're going to know that that's where all the sensors are. So I think it's Google really going through and saying, you know what, we're going to be serious about this now. These are going to be our serious plays into this space. And they're not releasing, 4 different versions, 5 different versions, 10 different versions. They have 2. That's it. I don't see any other variants coming of this. Maybe next year you'll see a 6A, possible. But right now, they got 2 players. They know who they're shooting for, and that's what they're after.
I always find it funny that we pay more for Android stock than we do for OEMs that put a bunch of bloatware on our machines. I always find that to just be comical. But I am really pleased with this entire lineup. I'm not actually sad that I bought the Pixel 5 and will now trade it in, and it'll cost me, a couple $100, in changeover and whatnot. That's fine. Really, to get a 6 Pro that is going to be absolutely top notch in terms of capabilities. And while I went from the Pixel 2 XL to the 5. So it was a pretty big leap for me, and that was just because the 2XL just kept on trucking. I'd gone through 3s, 4XL, it was 4A, I think it was a 4A XL, and like I was going through Pixel devices for testing and utilizing and whatnot. I went through a Samsung Galaxy 20 or S20 or S21. I had several different phones, but my primary was still my 2XL for some reason. It was just because it was what I was comfortable with. That body was bigger than the Pixel 5, but same screen size, exact same screen size. And so going to the 6 Pro, the Pixel 6 Pro will be interesting for me because it'll be this, high, high quality HD, and will be a little, incrementally bigger, but just a bigger screen size. So I'm curious to see how that will play out in terms of, like I always talk about pocketability, right? The ability for you to take your phone and stick it in a back pocket and, it fitting. And so I'm really curious with case and everything else like that, whether the 6 Pro, the Pixel 6 Pro will go ahead and do that.
Well, the fact that they brought the 6 out in the smaller size factor, I think is a big callback to recognize that not everybody has massive pockets, which there's clearly a market for that. And again, that price point. But they're not going anemic on it. I mean, you think about a $599 phone, a $600 phone. This is a $600 phone that's coming in with 8 gig of RAM and 128 gig of storage. That's nothing to sneeze at. You're getting a device that a year ago was a flagship device. So I really have no qualms about what they laid out on the table so far from the hardware perspective and especially from the software perspective. So go ahead.
Sorry, go.
Now, my question was going to be, based on what you guys have seen with the devices, though, and I'm going to ask you, would you recognize one of these phones if you saw it on the street?
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that's the difference right there. We have, for the first time, a Google phone that's not a slab of black glass. We have one that has a design aesthetic on the back that makes it stand out, that makes it clear that this is a Google phone, even beyond the little G, because even if you put a case on it, it's still going to have that distinctive bar across the back.
And the cases that are aftermarket and the ones that Google are providing, like has the big cutout for the bar. Right. It is clear.
To. And that, for a company whose design aesthetic has always been lacking,
Spartan is the...
All right. Fine. Maybe it is in the hot gates of Thermopylae, but engineering focused, we'll go that way. This is a whole different change for them. This is a whole different approach. And to me, when I start to look at these devices and people will get them in their hands, they're going to recognize, hey, you know what? I can go get one of those. I can see one of those. I will be very curious to see how these are played in the carriers. How they actually sell and push these, because those never really seem to do much. But I think when we talk about that that Google Pass later on, I think that's their way of fighting that. But can we talk about the cameras?
Yes, let's do it. 50 megapixel cameras.
Holy cow! I mean, if you're now, granted, there are bigger out there. I mean, there's 108. I forget even how big the camera is in mine. But just the fact that Google's going to something that's almost 4 times the size of what they had before, and then you make that available to their software, Google Night Shot, with a 4 times bigger sensor. I cannot wait to see the quality of the photos that come out. And the big press that they had, couple things, is that they actually have a legitimate telephoto on there now, which is a big step. And they're taking advantage of those multiple cameras. So they tackled their 4K video issue, because it's always been iffy on the 4K video, or on the video quality. They couldn't do the fancy algorithmic-based updates and cleanup of the video the way they could do it with the photos. But apparently they can now. The Tensor chip makes that possible. And when you see the samples of this video, it's like, holy cow, this is spectacular stuff. So again, we've talked about this in the past. This is a reference product. This is showing what's truly possible. And now other companies have to step up and say, yep, we can do that.
I'm really excited. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, if you watch the Samsung event, there is a point where they go through and when they're demonstrating UI 4.0, they call out improvements to the camera software, specifically to say, hey, we can do this stuff too with Magic Eraser and that sort. Well, they do something similar. So it's already pressing the market forward, saying, hey, this is now the minimum standard. You guys have to reach this and go beyond.
Right.
Yeah, so they have these two primary features that they showcased here among many other little refinements of the camera. But one of the things that I had constant problems with all of the prior Pixel phones is that if I open up my banking app, and I do a lot of mobile check deposit from various clients, and so I'll get a check, and now I'll open up the bank app, and the image that the bank app is pulling in is not clear. It's not as good because when I take it with the Google camera app, it's doing all of its machine learning on top of it and providing me with this great image. But when I do that with the naked phone, it's not taking as good a crisp image. I also have that problem, by the way, with my 7th gen iPad 10-inch. So it's not necessarily anything more than that, but the computational components of the photography enhance it, and that doesn't really work when you're scanning things. And I'm really looking forward to seeing this camera do that in these other ancillary applications where you're taking photographs that are without the computational components and still getting a clear image. And then the Magic Eraser app is basically your ability to take objects out of your photos. And so, if somebody photobombs you, you can go ahead and kind of remove that person or remove, silly objects that may be in the background that you don't want to have there in that sense. So that's really nice. Real tone, so that it actually captures skin tones effectively.
That was a big thing, just
Yeah.
to hold you there for a second. They spent a lot of time talking about how the machine learning has been improved for true skin tone recognition. And I think that's really important on a couple of different levels. One, not only the fact it's a technological leap, but two, the inclusivity leap and the recognition that this is a problem and doing something about it sets the tone for other manufacturers to say, yeah, we got to address that too, because it is clearly a problem. It is clearly a bias structure that, that the algorithms are not engineered and not educated in a way to have that diversification of being able to recognize different skin tones. It's really a big deal. It's big. They gave it a lot of time, but I think it's really important that they keep that at the forefront.
Absolutely. And go ahead, Augusto.
I was going to say, it is interesting because really what they did with the camera and the chipset and all this and the videos I have seen outside, I'm not a camera person. I'm not taking a lot of pictures, but I know iPhone users who do. And right now, if they come and ask for an advice, it's go and buy that thing because that's going to be cheaper and better camera than the camera you right now have on your iPhone.
And that's the thing that always intrigued me with the Pixel cameras. These are cameras that are truly point and shoot. They are smart enough that you will get a good photo almost every time. They will handle it for you. So if we look at that classic comparison of why people like Apple devices, it's because they, quote, just work.
Correct.
That's what the camera software does on a Pixel. It just works, and it works all the time, and you get fantastic photos. That's one of the things that I've missed when I moved away from a 4XL and I moved over to the Note 20. The camera's fantastic on this Note 20, but the software's just not quite the same. I know I'm going to have to go in and tweak it a little bit or play with it a little bit to get exactly what I want. Never had to do that on the Pixel. It was always smart enough to handle it for me. So you're absolutely right. If somebody comes to me and says, hey, I want to get an Android phone, I'm going to point them at a 6. I'm going to say make sure you're looking at this. I'll also point them at Samsungs and things like that, for comparisons. But if you like to take a bunch of pictures, yeah, you can't really go wrong with this.
I'll also note that so in addition to that, the real tone and the magic eraser, they've also added motion mode, which allows some action shots. If you're taking shots of people doing action-based shots, and then also face deblur, which seems to have been a problem with some children. Basically having their faces kind of show up blurry in images, and this goes ahead and corrects that so that it's
just to jump in on that, their description of how that worked, I found was very interesting because, again, this is a good example of Google leveraging the hardware that they've put into their device to provide functionality to solve a specific problem. In this case, if you have face deblur turned on, it actually takes a picture with two lenses at the same time and then uses machine learning and algorithms to cross combine those two, meshing the faces to give you that clear shot. It's one of those things. It's a feature. You turn it on, the problem goes away. It's that easy. But there's enough stuff in the background that they're able to be able to do that, and other vendors won't be able to because they don't have that hardware available to them.
Yeah, they did note that it does not work on dogs and cats, only humans.
Yes.
So that's an unfortunate one for us pet parents. But so they did add those features to the camera app, and again, it's just a matter of setting the bar high enough for those folks so that they're there. And then, do we know what the backside camera is?
I am looking right here.
Is it 12 megapixel?
Okay, the second ultra-wide camera is a 12 megapixel with a 2.2 aperture and 114 degree of view. The Pixel Pro also adds a 40 megapixel camera with a 4x optical zoom. So you've got, I believe, it looks like 12. That's the problem with these is you get so many cameras you can't tell what's what.
Right.
Yeah, it looks like there's the standard, the ultra wide, and if you get the Pro, then there's the telephoto. The front-facing camera
is also a 12 megapixel.
Yeah, it is actually there's two different ones. The front-facing camera on the 6 is an 8 megapixel with a 2.0 aperture, and the 6 Pro is an 11 megapixel with larger pixels and a slightly smaller 2.2 aperture. So, yeah. If you're a photo geek, that's going to mean something. If not, it's got cameras. So,
absolutely. And of course, it comes with Android 12, and there are some really fun things coming to Android 12. And so I don't want to get too far into the weeds there, but utilizing that tensor chip on your Pixel device so that you can do some of these things like live translation. I recently came into a challenge with a client, who doesn't speak English, and I don't speak her language, and so the funny enough, the second language of both of us that we could use was German, and unfortunately her German wasn't so great, and so I couldn't really understand, and so we had to use Google Translate, kind of put on speakerphone, use the live Google translation. It's not that it's not going to be perfect, but it was okay. Now it's being built into Google Meet. So you're capable of saying, okay, I'm in an English speaking environment, but I want to have the person understand me in another language. That's going to be really powerful for a lot of folks.
It was fascinating to watch the live demo because they did it with Marie Kondo and they were doing it through Japanese, which has a speed to it, which I think causes havoc with many of the translation applications. And the one thing she kept commenting, because she could understand not only the Japanese part of it, but the English translation of it, is how accurate the English translation was, which I know is always a challenge. It doesn't quite get it right. The fact that they're doing that on device is huge. And again, back to that tensor processor, the ability to move so much of that functionality on device. They also talked about the text-to-speech or the speech-to-text capability through. If you've been using the Google keyboard on your Android phone, you've had that capability, but that always goes out to the cloud and back. This is all locally processed now, so the speed is there, the reliability is there, and the data security is there. So that's a huge thing in my book. especially that speech to text capability.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I have to tell the story. I had experience similar. I traveled to Brazil to meet with a client, and when I get there, we have been doing business for a while, good business, but we discovered he didn't speak English. English was too bad. My Portuguese was worst. So we sit basically with the two computers side by side, and I type in Google and text to him. And when I saw that, it made me thought about that because it happened in Portuguese a couple of times, in French with the Canadians. So sometime I past of my life, and how easy is now to have a minimum conversation, discussion, coaching, but really use these tools, and how easier they are making it to even use it in the future.
Yeah, I think that, language barrier is kind of the ultimate final frontier for human communication. Part of, obviously, language is culture, and if we can get over the language part, then we can then start to sort of, I guess the final frontier is culture, but then the penultimate frontier would be language. And if Google can solve that for us in that sense, then it sets the standard for Zoom and for other organizations, large tech, to fix those problems, Microsoft Teams and otherwise. And so then we can start figuring out how to mediate across cultures, and that really brings humanity together in such a vibrant way. It seems subtle. It seems like such a subtle change, but it is actually substantial when we think about the fact that we can do this kind of live translation in a real-time engagement with someone across the planet, and not have language be the barrier to connecting. And I just think that's going to be really, think of grandchildren of parents, of grandparents who can't speak the language of their ancestors, and they're trying to go ahead and communicate with them now across languages. They can do those kinds of things. In that sense, I just see a lot of opportunity here, where it not only brings families closer together, but it also brings business closer, collegial and personal relationships closer, without that level of feeling that boundary of physicality and that boundary of language. So that was just, it stood out for me, and I thought that was really fascinating.
Now, not to be a fanboy for the Google phone stuff, but there are a couple things that concern me about it. One, they are still claiming that they'll get 24 hours of battery life even out of the bigger batteries, and I believe the Pro has a 5,000 milliwatt battery. That is yet to be seen. I don't think you'll ever get a 24-hour battery out of these things. But if you can go, a day, you're fine. If you can go 12 hours, 16 hours, and you can do a fast charge, you're fine. That, to me, is still a bit of an overstatement. I'm also still concerned about two main areas. One, how are they going to get these represented in the carriers so that people actually buy them? Because that was always a challenge with the Pixels, will continue to be unless they get a larger footprint. You can get it directly from Google. You can get it from some channels, but we're never going to see a massive groundswell on this. And I don't know if they're necessarily trying to do that, but if that's their intention, they got to get a better footprint for that. The second part is the same question I have when we talk about, say, the new Apple devices and anything like that. If you're making your own chips, do you have the supply chain necessary to be able to deliver this product? Same challenge with Samsung with the flip phones. They're already starting to see some of the stressors around being able to produce related to demand. And if these Google phones are the home runs that they look like they're going to be, are they going to be able to meet demand? I don't know. I've seen them struggle in the past. And with our current world state that we have with supply chain challenges, I mean, this Tensor chip is really cool, but the Tensor chip is also based on ARM processors. So it's not completely new from the ground up. There are other components that work into this equation that they have to have available to them, screen displays and that sort. So being able to meet demand is always a concern in my book for the way Google does things. So,
well, it's currently out of stock for several of the versions of the 6
is
Pro.
already out of stock.
Yeah, so I was looking at the trade-in value for my own 5, and you can still get, from what I'm seeing on the website right now, you can still get the 128 gigabyte here in the United States unlocked in Stormy Black in stock. But it seems like the higher level ones, which would, I would probably like to max out at the 512 gigabyte version. You can't get them because they're out of stock, and they'll be replenishing hopefully quickly enough. But you're absolutely right. We're going to be dealing with these supply chain shortages, predominantly forced by labor shortages, and then of course chip shortages compounded upon that. So we're going to have some issues with getting access to it. But I think these are all things that Google is prepared for and will solve over the short term. And then we get to the Pixel Pass, unless there's any other pieces here. I'll probably run through. So we noted the prices up front, $599 for the Pixel 6. It's at 128 or 256 gigabyte storage variants. That's a 6.4-inch screen, and they come in the colors of Kinda Coral, which is their limited edition version for that, Sorta Seafoam, and Stormy Black. Then on the Pixel 6 Pro side, that's $899 USD starting, and then you get 128, 256, or 512 gigabyte variants. 6.7-inch screen, so you get a little 0.3-inch screen bump up there. And then the 3 colors are available in Sorta Sunny, which is their limited edition color, and then Cloudy White and Stormy Black as well. So those are kind of the specs on all of this. Art had already noted the battery size. And so then we get on to the final thing they announced. Well, they announced the Pixel Stand also, but fine. But if anybody wants to talk about the Pixel Stand, we can. But really, the other primary thing that they discussed was the Pixel Pass. And so this is a bundle of sorts that puts together a number of different things. Pixel Pass is only available in the US. So if you're not in the US right now, you can just ignore this part. But the 6 and 6 Pro, as part of this process, you can get a Pixel Pass. What did you think about the Pixel Pass and all of that stuff? So that you're aware, it's the smartphone. You get biannual upgrades as built into it, and I'm not quite sure how that works. Is it going to be a lateral upgrade? Is what's the upgrade process there? But it also then gives you access to YouTube Premium, Google Play Pass, and a 200 gigabyte Google One tier storage plan option. So you can also add an optional preferred care plan, so that if you break or damage the phone, you can have some device protection built in. And so that's the whole kind of Pixel Pass connection there. And so it's a nice discount when you put it all together if you already have those things.
Well, and that would be my question, is if you already have those things, can you carry them over? Can you roll them over into it? Can you get that discount? Because $45 for the phone is high. How long, do you know how long that period is? I'm looking right now to see how long that term of monthly purchase would apply. Yeah,
I thought it was 2 years.
Okay.
I thought it was.
Okay. Well,
24 months,
okay.
2 years.
At 2 years, that's not too bad.
Yeah.
But still, with the premium and YouTube Music Premium and the Play Pass, I mean, Play Pass itself, you're talking probably, I forget how much I'm paying for that, but it's not a huge amount. It's a good play if you don't have a dedicated carrier, and you want to go down this path of using Google Fi. Plus, this gives you $5 a month off your Google Fi plan.
Right. Right. So it's like basically having a $25 or $35 phone payment along with $20 of bundled Google services together.
So is it Google self-subsidizing their phones?
It's giving, I don't know if it's subsidizing. I think it's giving people a remember that not everybody on there is going to stick with Pixel Pass forever. So it gives people a long enough time and an entry level for buy-in to the ecosystem, and then to feel like you can't do without it. Like, I have YouTube Premium, and I enjoy having YouTube Premium. I like having the features of YouTube Premium, and so then I'm not going to want to let that go after I maybe discontinue my Pixel Pass if I get to that point. So I think that's really the goal for them, is to give people an entrance into those Google Premium services. And then once they move on from, their Pixel device, they'll still want the Google services.
Yeah, the site itself is saying that, excuse me, if you get a Pixel 6 Pro with the Google Pass package, you're going to save $414 over 2 years. If you get a Pixel 6, it's going to be savings of $296 as compared to getting those individual services. So that kind of makes sense. I mean, if you wanted to go down that path and play that game and not have a dedicated carrier but use Google Fi, it's a great option. It's a viable option. I mean, it doesn't preclude you. I'm sure if you decided to not keep the Pixel after that, you could convert each one of those services over to regular service plans. I'm sure they would allow you to do that so that you wouldn't abandon all of it. The 200 gig in the cloud, it's not bad. I think you're going to chew through that pretty quick, though, with the camera and the photos you're taking, especially if you're going to keep them at original resolution rather than compressed. But it's definitely a good option. I mean,
yeah, you're not tied to Google Fi, I don't believe, at all.
Oh, really?
No, you're not tied to Google Fi. You just have to buy it through the Google Store. But you can have it unlocked and you can be on any carrier. So they're not tying you into a carrier, which is great.
You can buy it on Verizon. Verizon will give you a discount. You can buy it unlocked, or you can buy it on Google Fi.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. So
it's an option. Certainly an option.
I think it's good. I still think that they need to be able to provide. Like I still don't see this as a cost savings for me, but I wish that there were a plan for people who wanted, say, a YouTube Premium, YouTube TV. I really see those, like, why can't I have a plan that covers those two things? It makes sense. YouTube Premium gives me YouTube Music and then the additional features of content and removing ads from the YouTube videos, being allowed to have downloaded YouTube videos on my mobile devices so I can have YouTube locally if I'm on the road. All of those things are beneficial to me, but we also have YouTube TV and we're paying for YouTube TV separately. And that doesn't make any sense. It just seems like they both have YouTube in the name and we're an all Pixel household. We have a bunch of Pixel devices. So why can't we bundle those pieces together and make Pixel Pass and the YouTube pieces really come together to make sense? You're already bundling in YouTube Premium into the Pixel Pass. Why wouldn't you give me that in backwards compatibility? So I hope Google figures this out, because it makes no sense that we have this kind of weird pricing.
I think they have the same team that's doing their messaging products working on this. So
don't make fun of the Made by Google folks. All right.
I agree completely. I have YouTube TV. I've got the other services. I would love to see it under one umbrella. I'm totally fine with it under the YouTube TV umbrella. And if you don't have YouTube Premium and you're watching YouTube with commercials, I'm sorry. I apologize for you, because it is terrible. It's worth just getting rid of the ads. So
yeah, absolutely. All right. Any other final thoughts around the Google Pixel Fall launch event?
Where was the Fold? Where was the foldable Google phone? Where was the Google
Pixel Watch?
I mean, come on, guys.
I was going to say exactly that was going to be my question.
Is there more coming? Is there another event coming, or are they just kind of dragging their feet? This is one of those things that I wonder at times with Google, if they can't just all get in the same room and say, okay, let's do all this together. It just really fragments their messaging and their approach, I think.
Well, from a productivity perspective, I'm really inclined to have a Wear OS, a Pixel Watch that is tied to my phone for the seamlessness between. Like, I'm not worried about well, I am worried, but I mean, I feel more confident in having Google services and products because I can use them on any device. It doesn't matter whether I'm on a Debian OS platform. I can be on on Ubuntu, I can be on Mac, I can be on iPad, I can be on Android, I can be on Windows, and I'm gonna be able to access all of my Google services that I need to be productive. But really, the watch and phone, I just have this real need to have a deep integration so that I'm able to do everything that I need to do, and that's the part that I'm really most disappointed with as it relates to Google's slowness to this. Now, they own the Fitbit, and so the Fitbit and its connectivities are and have been great for a long time. And so I can't really fault them too much, but I wonder if there isn't a bit of internal conflict between putting out a Pixel Watch and the fact that they own Fitbit. And they've been putting out new models of Fitbit watches, which are pretty slick. They're nice, but they're just not Wear OS. And so I'm curious to see whether or not they put out a Fitbit Wear OS watch and put it under that brand as opposed to the Pixel brand, and if that's possible, right? Like if that's something within the realm of zone of possible agreement within the Google factions.
I will speculate that you will not see, if you do see a Fitbit Wear OS watch, you will only see one of them, because Wear OS is heavy, for lack of a better term. And the Fitbit audience has a very targeted purpose. I mean, the Fitbits tried to release the equivalent of a smartwatch before, and it has not done well. So if you want that smartwatch capability, you're going to step up to a Pixel Watch. You're going to step up to, a Galaxy Watch. I think they've kind of identified that's where they want that to be. The Fitbit side of the house, I think that's going to stay targeted, focused, and dedicated. What we may see, though, is some of the smarts come over. We may see some of the machine learning capabilities come over. We may find some way of them, turning a tensor chip into something equivalent to that on a health-related device, because Google's so all in on health and health capabilities. So it's possible, but somebody's at the front door. Go get it. But it's one of those things that I don't know that we're going to see them blend all that together. And it's just honest. Google never does that well.
I'm going to say that they have been making steady marches forward toward it. So Wear OS has come to Fitbit already, and in the Charge 5. So we know that Google is working on putting Wear OS onto Fitbit watches. So we've got the one, right? We've got the Charge 5 coming with Wear OS on it. I'm just curious. I mean, that's not a watch I'll wear. It's just not something that I'm going to be doing. And I've owned Fitbits before, and I love the concept of the Fitbit, but I'm a watch wearer. So I want a traditional classic looking watch, and I want it to also have the smart guts. And as you noted, Wear OS is a big app. I mean, it's a big application platform. It's a big operating system. And so we need to make sure that the hardware associated with that is, especially low level hardware, is going to be able to take the necessary requirements and make it seamless for the user on the other side. So I'm curious to see what they do with the Charge 5, but I don't know if that's the right direction for Fitbit in the premium watch space for people like me, which is someone who wants a classic watch. They want the watch to be of a premium nature, but I don't want a fitness band. I want a watch. I want something that is, classic, elegant, something that I can wear out and feel good, that it matches, my style and casual and dressed style.
And this is where I think that their joint effort with Samsung is going to pay off. Because you look at the Watch Classic, you look at the Active Watch, those fit that bill of what you're describing. They provide the Google capabilities, will provide better Google capabilities as time progresses. But they have that level of functionality. Looking at the Charge 5, it's a weird form factor. I mean, it's that long vertical form factor, which makes application design, again, difficult. Because if you're designing watch faces, you now got to design 2 watch faces, 3, 4. It gets complicated. So while I think we'll see that, I think they may lean back. Google may lean back and say, okay, we're not going to try and fight that space. We're going to let Samsung run with that, and we'll be a player involved in it through the background, providing the underlying architecture. Because if people use that, and if they finally put Assistant on the freaking watch, then they have that gateway and that connectivity. Bixby's fine. Bixby works, but Bixby is still Bixby. So,
yeah. All right, gentlemen. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Get a Siri. Oh no, that's not the,
Oh,
that's not the
That
right
is
show.
not a possibility in this house. I was in a meeting yesterday and I actually accidentally triggered Siri and I was shocked because I don't usually use Siri at all. And I was like, how did I even do that? I don't say, her
and
name.
that's actually the right adjective to use because Siri is very triggering. So,
Art, thank you so much for joining us. And where can folks get to know you more and find out more about what you're doing out there in the interwebs?
glad to be here, guys. You can come over to theideapump.com/follow me. If I'm writing something, if I'm recording something, or if I'm showing something, it's probably going to be there.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Art.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Art Augusto, we've done it. 3
And
episodes
we're
down today. So, folks, we will be back to our normal programming for Anything But Idle next week. But otherwise, hopefully you have enjoyed our special commentary episodes. And this is episode 87. So you have one coming after this in the podcast feed, which is episode 88 on the Apple launch event with Michael Slawinski and Art Gelwicks. And so enjoy all of the shows that we recorded today. And we'll see you next week on Anything But Idle. Here's to your productive life.